Back once again, ladies and gentlemen, to this brand new edition of The Save Point. I am your host, Joker.
And I am your co-host, Shepard.
My man, how have you been? How have you been, dude?
I've been very well, my man. I've been playing games, working away, living life to the amount
that we can, even with this minor pandemic still happening.
Yeah, so minor, you know.
It's only minor. It's only minor.
I can eat outside again. And by outside, I mean other places that are inside. If that makes sense. So I'm really happy about that.
And you know what, I'm
places seeing people again.
What I'm really happy about is the topic of the game that we're going to be discussing today. Can you believe it's actually been 20 years since Final Fantasy X?
No, fuck that.
20 years.
Fuck that, I quit. I'm done.
I can't even register that it's been 20 years. Where has the time gone?
Where has siblings younger than that game?
You know, I've got t-shirts older than this game. It's crazy. It's crazy. But the topic of discussion that we're going to be doing a little bit of a back and forth on today on this brand new edition of the Save Point is, of course, Final Fantasy X, and there is so much to dig into with this game. This was actually the first Final Fantasy game part of the series that was introduced to the new stage of console back in the very, very early 2000s. It was released solely for the PlayStation 2. So every other game beforehand, every mainland game that came before that was on the PlayStation 1. So this was a new direction for the company to go into, which introduced us to voice acting. It introduced us to 3D graphics, to rendered backgrounds, to just this new take on an already well-established JRPG franchise. So just to give a bit of a background, it's kind of what we usually do at the start of these videos. So Final Fantasy X was released in Europe lastly, should I say, on May 24th. It was directed and developed by the Square conglomerate, who at the time were actually called Squaresoft. The company was then bought out by Enix. So what happened with the company around this time, there was a fissure in what was happening. The company Squaresoft had pumped millions and just stupid amounts of money into what was called Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, the full-length CGI movie that happened around the same time. But because the movie essentially bankrupted Squaresoft and they were on their knees, they needed somebody to inject money and cash flow into their company, and Enix rolled along, having seen that they were very successful with their video games, and were like, hey, we'll buy you out. And they did. And unfortunately, the actual company seems to have gone onto a very morally questionable approach on how they develop their video games. There's a lot of DLCs and chopped up story parts that they include in their games now. But back in the day, it was purely Squaresoft who published this game. Much like with Final Fantasy 9, 8, 7, 6, pretty much all of them that came beforehand. So the director is a gentleman called Yoshinoro Kitase. The designers, there was a good few of them. Takayoshi Nakazato is probably very, very much well known for designing the game itself, and what it came before in the Final Fantasies beforehand were very mystical kind of surroundings, a lot of enchanted forests, a lot of medieval kind of approaches, a lot of direction from European medieval were taken to the previous games. With this one, I can only commend the artistic developers for taking Southern East Asian and Japanese architecture into the overall aesthetic of the game. A lot of the temples that are in Spira are heavily influenced by those Asian aesthetics, which is fantastic. But I think what really sticks out for me, especially, is the music, which the main composer of Final Fantasy X is once again Nobuo Uematsu, and his style. It's just for me, Final Fantasy X is just the pinnacle of his musical genius. It really, really is. There's very, very few parts of this game where I don't enjoy the music. There's maybe one or two that I'm kind of like, oh God, this is just so repetitive and boring. But what I really do appreciate about what Nobuo Uematsu did, everybody in the game has their own theme, their own moment, their own melodic compositions. Like when you hear it in the background, you know that somebody is going to arrive, or when a particular character is talking, their theme is playing in the background, and it's just absolutely fantastic. But I suppose the biggest difference was the voice acting. They introduced a stellar cast of voice actors, and now some of it can come across a little bit stilted. I think there was some translation issues, but for the most part, I think having voiced characters in this new generation of Final Fantasy, it really, really paid homage, I suppose, to what came after with Final Fantasy 12, with 14, with 15. The list does go on and on, but this was like the blueprint of where it started. Do you remember the impact that this made on gaming at the time? Do you remember?
I actually don't. Personally, I at that point in my life, I had very little experience with the JRPG genre. I hadn't really played. I certainly hadn't played a Final Fantasy game. So I'd see the boxes and I'm like, oh, the artwork's pretty cool, but I'm gonna sit over here with my Metal Gear Solid 2, and that was the primary kind of Japanese export, I suppose, I was playing on the PS2. And I initially, and don't judge me, any of you, my first exposure to Final Fantasy as a franchise was Final Fantasy X-2.
And on that point, that for joining us on the save point, Joker quits. But yeah.
I know.
Yeah, it's quite a controversial sequel, I suppose, to an already very well established title that came before it, and it was Final Fantasy X-2. We'll get to that later. I keep forgetting about that game because I hate it.
Fair.
Like there's a lot of things that it does right, and there's a lot of things I look at it and I'm like, I kind of start getting shivery, and I'm like, no. But we'll get to that when it does happen. But before we kick into the meat of the video, I suppose there's some artifacts from a bygone age I want to introduce you to. They're quite old. Back in my day, we couldn't look up how we do things on how we play games. I have here in my hands the Final Fantasy X walkthrough. I bought 20 years ago. 20 years ago, and it's still, I reference this every now and then for help. Now I've played the game inside and out, but I still have it. I still have the old walkthrough.
That's a collectible. That's
I'm actually afraid to even hold it at this stage because I'm afraid it's going to disintegrate. And about the game you were talking there, I also bought the Final Fantasy X-2 walkthrough because I really needed it because the game didn't make any sense. But yeah, we'll get there when we get there. So Final Fantasy X, I mean, this game for me especially is extremely special because growing up, it was kind of my game. Well, I think we all have those. Any gamer has one of those titles from a franchise that they're extremely passionate about, and it's like, no, that's my game. Final Fantasy X for me is my game. What I mean by that is I fell so madly in love with the art style, with the combat system. To me, just going on the combat system as a quick side note, is the combat system for me in this game itself is perfection at its finest. It's that turn-based combat system, which was just perfected. You can really take your time as to how you're going to approach a situation, with how you're going to analyze enemies and their tactics and things like that. So the turn-based system was absolutely it was perfected at this stage, and I don't think it's been really touched on yet to that caliber. Which brings me to another point. There was around this time, actually, there was another turn-based game called The Lord of the Rings, The Third Age, and lo and behold, I also have the walkthrough for that. But that was also turn-based, and the director of that game, and Prima, I think they were called, they took inspiration from Final Fantasy X to do the turn-based system in their own game, and it's just goes to show you the impact that this little franchise, or this one addition into a long franchise, had on other developers and writers. So I suppose we best start talking about the story, and we're not going to dive too much into every single thing that happens. I think it's important to premise that we're going to highlight the main points There's a lot to dig into with this game. There's a ton of side content, which is just mind-blowing. There's mini games you can do to unlock extra collectibles, extra weapons, and that kind of thing. But I suppose we should start introducing some of the main characters and the main character who we play as. And I'm going to put it out right now that I'm going to pronounce, and this will probably trigger a lot of people, but I don't care. The main character's name in this video from now on is Titus. Okay?
Titus. It's Titus. No, man, I'm gonna go with Titus as well.
You know, the thing is, though, I can understand why people would say his name is Titus, because the voice actor for Titus, James Arnold Taylor, was actually he went up to the director at the time and was like, how do we pronounce his name? Because usually on the script it would say Titus's name, and the director phonetically pronounced it as Titus. So that's if the voice actor took it that his name is Titus. But for me, it just sounds weird. It sounds strange. I always kind of just envisioned it as Titus because of his affinity with water. Yeah, so that's the thing. So I'm just gonna call him Titus. If it triggers you guys or anybody watching this, I'm not sorry. But
you can't do anything to us. We already are afraid of the comments. You can't make it anyways.
Exactly.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm kind of the same mindset as yourself. Anytime I've referred to the game outside of playing it, I've always thought of him as Titus. The way it's spelled, as you said, I suppose subconscious for me association with water. This fucking sword has waves in it, Stephen. Jesus Christ.
And he's also a football player. He plays sport underwater.
Yeah, his whole thing is water.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm gonna go with Titus as well.
As long as you're happy to go with Titus, man, I'll go with Titus.
Yeah. Titus all the way. Respect. Titus, my bro. Titus.
So we open up the game itself, and I must have watched this thing. God, just the opening itself, but before the actual main game starts kicking off, we open up with this epilogue, this prologue of this ruined city, and there's a sunset in the background, and there's 7 people sitting around a campfire, and there's this beautiful piece of music playing in the background called To Zanarkand, which is the main theme of the game. And it's a beautifully well composed piece of music. It's very melancholic, very gentle. It feels almost like somebody is wrapping their arms around you from behind you, kind of protecting you from what you're seeing. And what we're seeing in this moment of the game is this ruined metropolis, and our main character Titus, he's kind of looking out over this, and his eyes are fixated on all the broken, cramped buildings that are essentially sinking into this vast, endless ocean. And it introduces us to the first thing we hear, which is "Listen to my story. This may be our last chance." And it opens up. The game title comes up, Final Fantasy X. And then this lovely upbeat piece of music happens, and we're almost transported to where the game actually begins. And Titus exits his houseboat. He is the star player of the Zanarkand Abes. He's a very, very successful and very famous sports person for this sport called blitzball, which is a kind of a cross between rugby and soccer underwater. However that works, but he's a very famous blitzball player, and he's met with an entourage of fans who are waiting outside his house, and they're like, can you sign my blitzball? And this is the chance where we can actually either choose to name Titus after somebody else's name, our own name, or if we can choose to keep the default name Titus. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to use the default name. So Titus signs a bunch of blitzballs. He's engaging with the fans. He's saying, "Oh, I'll keep an eye out for you when I'm about to score. Like, what's the seat number that you're at? I'll give you a thumbs up." And it's a very cute kind of scene. In a corner of this crowd is a small child. He must be about maybe 9 or 10 years old, and he's draped in these kind of purple robes. And he comes up to Titus and says, "The game that you're going to play tonight is very, very important." And Titus kind of looks at him and then looks back towards the crowd, and some female members of this crowd are like, "Oh, do you want to come out for a celebration drinks afterwards? Because we know you're going to win." And Titus is like, "Yeah, absolutely, I'll totally go with you." And the child kind of pulls at his leg, and the child says, you can't do that tonight." And Titus is like, "Oh yeah, I mean tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow." So that's kind of brushed aside the first time you might play it. Yeah, it's kind of like, okay, whatever. Titus is walking towards the Blitzball Stadium, and it's important to note that his home, Zanarkand, is this very heavily illuminated city. There's tall, cramped buildings. It's basically a metropolis built over water. And how you navigate, you don't really navigate a lot in Zanarkand. You kind of go from point A to point B. It's kind of linear. And that's one of the points that a lot of fans are a little bit trepidatious about, is it is quite a linear experience, especially as the game kind of progresses. An arrow is in your map, and you're told where to go and that kind of thing. But Titus is he's walking towards the Blitzball Stadium, so it's his team versus a rival team. And as he's walking past one building, he sees an illumination of his father, and his father's name was Jecht. And Jecht was also a star Blitzball player back in the day when he was in the Zanarkand Aves, but he's been missing for 10 years. And this Blitzball tournament that's happening is called the Jecht Memorial Cup. So it's played in honor of Titus's father, Jecht. But Titus is, anytime he looks up at the billboard, and he kind of sucks his teeth, he kind of clicks his tongue, and he's like, blech. So there's kind of immediately the player is told, okay, there might be a bit of a friction going on here. Where is Jecht? Where did he disappear off to? Is he dead? We don't know this in this point in time. So Titus makes his way to the Blitzball Stadium in Zanarkand, and we are opened up and introduced to this beautiful, just even today it holds up so well. Titus is kind of waiting for the game to start. He has his head kind of leaning back, and it opens up with this very punchy heavy metal number. And as the players are jumping into the sphere to start the Blitzball game, this music is escalating up, and it's really, really aggressive, and it kind of is like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Out in the distance of the outskirts of Zanarkand, there's this man standing on a platform looking out towards the sea, and he's wearing this long red kind of samurai kimono with his arm tucked in, and he has almost like a grog flask in his arm, and he kind of like toasts the sea, and the sea rises in this huge wave, and then it cuts back to Titus playing the Blitzball game. And the crowd are going nuts after they see Titus. He's just about to do a signature move, the backward kick into the opponent's goal. And then out of nowhere, Titus notices that there's flashing lights going on, and Zanarkand around him is starting to be attacked. So we don't know what's going on right now, but something from the sea is causing this chaos. Titus grabs onto a ledge after the Zanarkand Blitzball Stadium has basically been fully blown to pieces. Titus wakes up outside, and he gets up, and he's holding his head, almost trying to stop a headache that's happening. And he runs to the entrance, and there's people running past him because of this attack. And we are introduced to Oren, who is Titus's, I suppose, guardian. And Titus is like, what are you doing here? And Oren is like, I was waiting for you. And he walks off. And Titus is like, what are you talking about? Like, what's going on? He runs off after Oren, and all of a sudden time stops. So everybody running past Titus, they're frozen into position. And the child at the beginning of the game, wearing those purple robes, those decorative purple robes, appears before Titus, and he says, it begins. And then he says, no, don't cry. Don't cry. We'll get back to that point further down the video. But Oren grabs Titus while Havoc and all this mess is happening, he grabs Titus by the arm and says, look. And the camera pans up, and Titus looks up, and he sees a sphere, a perfect sphere of water. Now we can't see what's in this sphere. We can only see the outline, and it looks almost like a blue whale surrounding itself with almost like armor. And Oren says, we call that sin. So now we have a name for what's attacking Zanarkand. So Oren hands Titus a sword after this whale thing is basically dropping these spawn, this like scales that turn into these monsters. And Oren hands Titus this weapon and he goes, take this. And then he says, it was a gift from Jecht. And Titus is like, my old man, Jecht? And Oren looks at Titus and looks at the enemies and goes, I hope you know how to use it. So that's the kind of the introduction into the turn-based system of the game. And you as Titus, you and Oren fight off these waves of enemies. Zanarkand around you is exploding. There's flames, there's smoke everywhere. It puts the player into that position of what the hell is going on and what's attacking my home. What is going on here? But we're not told anything. All we're told is that this being that's attacking Zanarkand is called Sin, but we can't see it properly. But it must have this immense power to be able to literally, district by district, wipe out a city. And it's immense. It really, really is immense. It all comes ahead when Titus is chasing after Oren, and he kind of leaps up from this bridge that's collapsing, and he's hanging by this ledge, and Oren is just above him. And Oren looks up towards Sin and says, are you sure? And then he looks back down to Titus. Now Zanarkand is being sucked up into this cavity. So the city is basically being pulled up and is being absorbed by this entity. And Oren still has no fear. He's very calm. He's very collected. Whereas Titus is like, what the hell is going on? What's going on with my home? What's happening here? And Oren grabs him by the scruff of his neck and pulls him up, and he says, this is it. This is your story. It all begins here. And bang, we're transported to an unknown destination, completely unknown. We wake up in this ruined temple way out at sea. Now I'm going to get back to this temple much later into the video, because it's very important in terms of a lore background and a lore prospect, but I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So Titus basically ends up in this underground temple, and he's like, it's freezing. You can almost smell the salt in the air because you're in an underwater temple. It's cold. There's nothing else around you except this damp air that kind of coats your lungs. It's very, very heavy. And Titus is like, I need fire. I need fire. You come across the remains of what is actually an old campfire. And after Titus kind of explores the underwater temple, he finds some flint, he finds a withered bouquet, and he smashes the two of them together and he creates this campfire. And Titus is sitting there and he's rocking back and forth, and he's like, what the hell is going on? What just happened? And I think as direction wise, I think it's a beautiful kind of thing, because we as the player are living this new experience through Titus. We don't know what's going on. Our home has been destroyed by this unknown entity. We've been transported to this new place. It's absolutely fantastic how it's directed, because we're living the story through Titus. Out of nowhere, Titus gets attacked by this fiend monster, and right as he's fighting it off, the doorway of the temple blows up, and we are now introduced into these. They're kind of like scavengers, but they're wearing these very outlandish clothes. They've got scuba diver goggles on, very bright kind of gear. And after Titus defeats the fiend with the help of these new friends, they start talking to him and amongst each other in this very foreign voice. And it's a really cool thing, because the game is subtitled, so when a character talks, the subtitle appears. But when these people talk, it comes up as gibberish almost. So the subtitles they appear in white. But with these other characters, they appear in kind of like a light purple. So when they're speaking to each other, Titus doesn't understand what they're saying, and we as the player don't understand what they're saying, which is really cool. So they knock Titus out, and they put him onto their ship, their their trawler almost. And this is where we're introduced to Riku, and she is actually a translator. She can understand what Titus is saying, and she can also understand what her comrades are saying. It turns out that this group are called the Al-Bed. They're scavengers of machina, which are the machine, the machine kind of artifacts that they're hunting for. So Riku basically says to Titus, we found some underwater ruins. We believe it's an airship. If you want to stay with us and we'll help you out whatever way we can, you're going to have to help us. So you do that, you activate the airship underneath the water, and Riku and Titus are having a conversation shortly after. And Riku is like, so we found you in that temple. Are you okay? Where are you from? And Titus is like, oh, I'm the lead player of the Xanark and Dabes. Don't you know who I am? And Riku was like, did you hit your head? And Titus is like, what do you mean? So Titus then starts explaining what happened, like about a day ago, what happened. Talks to her about this entity called Sin, talks to her about Xanarkand, his life in Xanarkand. And after the conversation, Titus notices that Riku isn't saying anything. And Titus is like, did I say something wrong? You've gone really quiet. And Riku was like, you can't be from Xanarkand because that was destroyed 1,000 years ago. And Titus is like, what? Hang on, what are you talking about? So Titus starts questioning things like, is she lying to me? Like, what's the story? And Riku was like, you said that something called Sin destroyed your home. Like, one of the side effects is if you're ever in close contact with Sin, that your head goes a bit fuzzy. It's part of the toxin that Sin releases. It turns out that in this new reality or new timeline that Titus is in is still quite a threat. So she said, oh, you play blitzball. Have you ever tried going to Luca? And Titus is like, what's that? And she's like, oh, it's this big blitzball city where, you know, if you go there and you ask around, maybe you might meet somebody you recognize. And right before he can kind of agree to that, the waves burst open. The rest of the Al-Bed run out and they show that it's Sin. And Titus gets knocked overboard. And it's kind of like, can this guy get a break? Can he really get a break? I mean, honest to God, can he get a break? But he can't. So Titus ends up washed alongside this tropical island. He's actually hit on the head with a blitzball. He's face down in the water, and he wakes up after being hit by a blitzball, and he's like, blitzball, awesome! And he jumps up and he kicks the ball back to shore, and there's a bunch of locals waiting on the shoreline, on the beach. And Titus swims over, and the crew are like, or not the crew, the locals are like, yo, you're no amateur. What team you play for? And Titus is like, the Xanark and Dabes. And the leader of this group is like, what team did you say again? And Titus is like, oh, sorry, I got too close to Sin, and my head is a little bit woozy, so I don't really know where I am or who I am at the moment. Rocket is like, he was the leader. Rocket is like, oh, but you survived. Praise be to Yevon, you survived. And Waka does this kind of salute, which is, he holds his hands like this and he bows.
Oh, yeah.
And Titus is looking at this, and it's very, I'm actually rather glad that they had the technology to do this, because if it was with the pre-rendered models or pre-rendered backgrounds or anything, you probably wouldn't have noticed it. But as soon as Titus sees Waka doing this salute, his eyebrow raises. Something so simple. So Waka is like, long ago there was cities in Spira, which is the world that you end up in, having been transported there by Sin. Long ago there was Machina cities everywhere, and people became so lazy and so dependent on Machina to do all the work that they just became so uninterested in life. And out of nowhere, Sin appeared and destroyed all the Machina cities and reduced the human population down to a fraction of what it was. And the doctrine that preaches this is the main religion in Spira, called Yevon. So 99.9% of people in Spira follow Yevon's doctrines, except 0.1%, which is the Al-Bed, because they are Machina hunters, and Yevon completely forbids Machina use for fear of sin constantly attacking. You know, so that's the thing. So a lot of, like, what I did appreciate it was when you're playing as Titus in the brief moments in Zanarkand, you can see that the whole city is built along these machines and their engineering. When you're transported to Spira, and when you're on Besaid itself, where you wake up after Sin attacks the Al-Bed ship, you see that everything is much more primitive. They live in huts and don't rely on massive amounts of electricity or machina to get by for fear of provoking Sin's wrath. So Waka then leads him to Besaid village, and again, very primitive in its aesthetics. There's a lot of huts. There's you know, and people are looking at Titus, like passerbys, like, well, not passerbys, when you interact with NPCs in the game, they'd be like, where did you get your clothes from? And where are you from? And Titus is actually rather reticent on responding because he doesn't know how it's going to be taken.
Yeah.
Which I actually do appreciate, because it's almost like Titus is an insert for the player.
Yeah, it's a classic storytelling thing, isn't it? Where they, like, if they're introducing this fantastical world to players, they make the protagonist not necessarily a blank slate, but someone that is not familiar with the universe and mechanics and physics and history and everything. Like, obviously, a good example is Harry Potter. Harry Potter is a Muggle human, finds out he's a wizard, goes to Hogwarts, learns how the wizarding world functions through school. It's the most literal, I suppose, way of doing it. And I think they do that really well with Titus, because it also, for Titus, he has something that he's lost. He's coming from, like, I was king of the world, everyone loved me, I was top of my game, to this stranger in a foreign world, no idea how anything works, how the people are, like, what religions are dominant. He's a nobody. It's essentially, like, he's kicked off his throne, and I think that's really good as well, because you kind of sympathize with him a bit. You know, he's lost everything. Even like the two characters we know he had connections with, Jecht and Oren. Now Jecht, as you said, has been missing for 10 years and whatever, but nobody knows Jecht at the moment. And Oren, where's he at? You know, so, like, starting off the story with that, I think, was really clever. It's like, you see what he's lost.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that when I eventually got to playing Final Fantasy X, like 15 years after it came out.
Yeah, I mean, like, the point that you made there, like, Titus is kicked off his throne. Like, nobody knows who the Zanarkand Abes are, and whenever he mentions he's from Zanarkand, people are like, you can't be from there. So Yevon is preaching that Zanarkand is this holy place, that people go there as part of a pilgrimage, and we'll get to that in a moment. But Riku had said to him, look, just be careful about who you say you're from Zanarkand to, because they'll look at you like you have 10 heads. So as the player, we're like, what do I tell people? Like you are as confused as Titus is, essentially. You came from this world where everybody knows your name, knows your face, knows your dad, and then all of a sudden you're literally plucked out of your comfort, your comfort zone, and dropped into this foreign. You're naked. You don't know what to do. So Waka leads you to Besaid village, and there's a temple there. And Waka says, "Oh, come here." He says, "You do remember the greeting, don't you?" Because Waka still thinks you're from Spira. You just have like a serious case of amnesia.
Yeah. And
Titus is like, greeting, I don't know. And Waka is like, how bad is that toxin? Are you really that bad? And he's like, no, look, I was only teasing, forget it. Here's what you do. So he does the salute, and Titus does it, and Waka walks off, and he says, Waka says to Titus, come find me and we'll eat and we'll go to the temple and pay our respects. And Titus is looking at the salute that he did, and he's like, any blitzball player would know that this is a sign for victory. Because when Titus had left his houseboat and was greeted by fans, they all did the same salute to him.
Yes.
As if wishing him good luck. And now in this world, this is now a religious bow. So Titus is like, I know what this is, but should I say I know it from Zanarkand? So the game kind of rolls on, and you go to the temple in Besaid, and you're looking around this place, and there's these statues dotted around these. They're about 10 feet tall. They're kind of like these eidolons or Greek gods. Like, the gods are here. They're in these statues. They're very well presented and very well kept. And the head priest of the temple comes out, and he just starts talking to Titus. He's like, 10 years later, and we finally have a statue of the last High Summoner, Lord Braska. Isn't it beautiful? And Titus is like, who? and the priest looks at him, and it's like, he's shocked. He's like, you don't know who Lord Braska is? And Titus is like, I got quite close to sin and the toxin. I don't even know who I am. He's lying, obviously. He knows who he is, and he's afraid to tell people where he's from. But the priest is like, whenever a summoner reaches the stage of Grand Summoner, their statues will appear in other temples. So just to make that clear, a summoner is somebody who can wield these magnificent alloys or beasts called aeons. And there's only a select few of these summoners that have happened or have come into power over Spira's life cycle. And their main mission or purpose is to journey to the 5 main temples in Spira and obtain the final Aeon in order to battle and defeat sin. That's their training. That's the training that they go under. And in this temple, a summoner is being trained, but she hasn't come out of the Cloister of Trials in about 3 days. Now, the Cloister of Trials is only an area of the temples of Spira that a summoner and their guardians can enter. It's taboo for anybody else to enter. So there's a summoner in there currently receiving their first Aeon, 1 of 5. And Waka is looking up at the entrance to the Cloister of Trials. It is a part of the game that you play where, like, this to me, I fucking hated the Cloister of Trials. I'm not going to lie to you. I found it to be such a waste of time. It's basically like it's like a puzzle part of the game where you have to use these spheres to open doors and put them into pedestals and open other areas of the Cloister of Trials. To me, it kind of pulled my focus from the story itself. And I know that it is a negative kind of opinion on a lot of players of Final Fantasy X. I just wish they were never in there as part of a puzzle kind of thing. So I just think it kind of pulls you away from the story. Like, because a lot of the time the game is so heavy around the story and the combat. The Cloister of Trials just seems to be like they needed to stretch the time out even more than what it is, and this is what they are. So for me, it just felt a little bit one-sided. So Waka says to Titus, the summoner hasn't come out in 3 days. The village is kind of worried about this. And Titus kind of takes it upon himself. He's like, what if they die in there? Like, what, we don't like. And Waka is like, no, we can't go in. There's already other guardians in there. We can't go in, and you can't go in. And Titus is like I care. And he bolts in, and then there's a passage or a narration comes up with, maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all. So we end up in the main antechamber of Besaid Temple, and there's 2 other guardians in there. It turns out Waka is actually a guardian of this summoner. And there's 2 other guardians in there. We have the Black Mage. Her name is Lulu. She dresses in all black. She's very stern, very no bullshit. She'll turn you to stone if you ask her the wrong question. And the other one is Kamari Ronso of the Ronso tribe. He's not human. He kind of has the characteristical traits of a lion meets a panther. they're that kind of race. The Ronso are that kind of race. They're very animalistic, but he's also a guardian. And Lulu looks at Titus for what appears to be an eternity. It's almost like she recognizes him, and she's like, who are you? And I'll get to that in a moment. So the antechamber opens up, and this young lady kind of stumbles down the steps, and Kamari darts up and grabs her. And this is where we are introduced to one of the most important characters, I think, in the game. Her name is Yuna. She's 17 years old, the same age as Titus, and she is the daughter of High Summoner Braska, who was the last High Summoner who the High Priest mentioned to us. She has now completed her training, and she is now ready to take her pilgrimage to become a High Summoner and defeat Sin, which a lot of the game does center around. And just going back onto that point, after Yuna summons her first Aeon, which is Velafor, it's this kind of phoenix, eagle kind of creature. That's your first Aeon of the game. Where there's 5 in total, 5 main Aeons that you get in Velafor. Just so happens to be the first one that you get.
Yeah.
And it comes into a gameplay mechanic where, as Yuna, because you're switching a lot between characters, as Yuna, you can summon these Aeons to help you in battle, but all the other team members go off screen. So it's basically Aeon versus enemy, and you can upgrade them. You can power up their stats, their health, their magic points, their HP, their strength, all this kind of thing. So you can actually put a lot of time into upgrading and investing in these Aeons, because they are much more powerful. In the start of the game, they're much more powerful than your standard characters. And I think it falls into a rock paper scissors kind of equation, which is what the JRPG kind of trope is. Titus is very quick. He's very dexterous. He's the quickest against speedy enemies because he'll hit them first. Waka, he uses his blitz ball to hit flying enemies that other main characters that you're playing as can't do. Lulu is the mage of the group, so a lot of her attacks are magic based. Kamari doesn't make a fucking difference, but
finally someone said it. I fucking hate Kamari.
Yeah,
he is useless. You throw him out, and 5 seconds later he is down on the ground, out for the count. Waste of a team member. I hate him.
You know, I think this is where that's a good segue actually onto the upgrade system in the game called the Spirit Grid, which is, as your player gets more experience, it opens up this leveling system where you can branch out onto your own path. So for Titus, for example, if you wanted to, you could make him less quick and more powerful with brute force. You could have characters going off on a completely different sphere grid and get them to maybe train in white magic and black magic. You could have Waka being a mage. You could have Lulu being able to hit flying enemies, which is a game system and power-up system which to me was really, really cemented in this franchise, in this franchise, where, and it kind of going back to to Kamari, like his sphere grid kind of doesn't go anywhere. You know, he's kind of in this one zone, and I never really used him, to be honest with you. He was my least favorite, kind of along with Riku. We'll get to that later. But Kamari,
I'd use Kamari when another character was maybe unconscious, and I'm like, I don't like. Say if I had Titus and Waka and Yuna, and Waka gets downed, I'd trade Waka out for Kamari, and then I would recover. If I got, I think that's how it works. I would use a Phoenix down. On Waka instead of sending out Lulu or Riku or someone I want to use. I'm like, no, Kamari, you can tank the hit.
Yeah,
I'll bring this other character back. Then you can fuck off.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Now, Insane, we're kind of hating on Kamari at the moment, and understandably why. But he does have this really cool ability called Lancet, which is where you can use this ability on other enemy types and learn their special moves.
Yes.
So he does come in handy that way, and there have been moments when he did get me out of a scrape, but for me, he was my least used character. But his arc is gorgeous. His arc is absolutely beautiful, I must say. He's a disgraced member of his Ronso tribe. 2 of his rivals had broken the horn on his head, so he only has half a horn. They were bullying him basically for being smaller, and they shunned him from his tribe. Kimari was shunned because he has half a horn. So naturally the game kind of progresses on. Lulu is saying to Waka, I understand why you've taken a liking to him because of who he looks like. And it turns out that Titus is the fucking spitting image of Waka's brother Chapu.
Oh.
And this is where Waka gifts Titus his signature sword, the Brotherhood. It's kind of like this blue blade with water in it, which is why we're still going to call him Titus, because of his affinity with water. If you're still watching now, you're not triggered, which is great.
We love you. You're cool.
But Lulu says to Waka after he's gifted Titus this blade, he's like, that's the sword you gifted Chapu. And Waka's like, well, yeah, he never used it. There's a reason why Chapu never used this, right? So in Besaid, we're introduced to not only the practices of Yevon, we're not only introduced to the villagers who are worshippers of Yevon, we're introduced to this group called the Crusaders, and they're like the warrior soldiers of Yevon. So remember when I said that like summoners are bestowed with this pilgrimage to defeat sin? The Crusaders pull sin away from mainland Spira.
All right. Okay.
You know what I mean? So if there's going to be like if sin was sighted in Besaid, the Crusaders would gather there and pull his attention elsewhere, pull them away from Besaid or what it might be. So naturally the game kind of progresses on, and you're leaving to go to another island in Spira called Kilika, which is the second temple that Yuna must pray at to get her new Aeon. And while you're on the boat, Yuna looks to you and she's like, you're from Zanarkand, aren't you? And Titus is like, oh, you heard that from Waka? And Yuna is like, I've heard that there's this great blitzball stadium in Zanarkand, and it's all lit up at night, and thousands of people flock there, and it's an all-night sensation, and you hear the cheers of the crowd, and the city is all lit up, and it's a city that never sleeps. And Titus is like, how do you know that? And Yuna says, a man named Jekt told me. He was my father's guardian. And Titus is like, Jekt. It's my dad. And Yuna is like, amazing. This our meeting must be the blessings of Yevon. And Titus is like, no, it's more complicated than that. And Yuna is like, what do you mean? And Titus says, my father, he died 10 years ago off the coast of Zanarkand. He died. He went out to sea for training one day and he never came back. And Yuna is like, 10 years ago, but that's when I met Jekt for the first time. I was only 7 years old. So something is going on here. Something is going on here. Now it's kind of putting it into the player, like, could it really be Jekt? How did Jekt get from Zanarkand to Spira? Because Zanarkand is so far removed away from Spira. How did Jekt get from Zanarkand to Spira? How did he meet Yuna? How did he meet Yuna's dad? How did this happen? We're not told about it straight away. But all of a sudden, doesn't it link us back to when we played as Titus in Zanarkand? Because he's been missing for 10 years, and all of a sudden you end up in this new world, and now people know who the name Jekt, they know who Jekt is, because he's one of Lord Braska's guardians, the famous Lord Braska who defeated Sin 10 years ago. Jekt was one of Braska's guardians. So now it's like the motions are being kind of connected here. Right as Titus is about to respond, this is where we see, so we've been told about the threat that sin is. We've been told how powerful it is, that it destroyed Zanarkand 1,000 years ago, that it attacks Machina cities around Spira. It keeps people in this caveman kind of way of living where they're not supposed to rely heavily on Machina. All of a sudden, Sin's fin comes out of the sea. And I think it's this cutscene where you're on your way to Kilika and the camera cuts and it's Sin on its way to Kilika. And it's this village that's built on the water. And even to this day, when I go back and play it, like 20 years on, when you see the destruction that this being causes, it completely eradicates the village, destroys it completely. But before you see Sin attacking Kilika, in the cutscene of when it happens is a young boy his mother, and the mother is nursing a child, a baby, a newborn baby it must be, and the son is kicking around the blitzball, laughing and playing in his home, with the sun gorgeously setting off in the background. And then all of a sudden, everything goes dark, and it's the shadow of a wave. And like this almighty tsunami, it crashes into the village. And this cyclone happens when it starts sucking up the huts. You can actually see people being caught in this whirlwind. And it's that moment when you're watching this cutscene, like you're told, like this is a threat. Why wouldn't we support the summoners in their quest to vanquish sin? And the last thing you see in the CGI cutscene is the blitzball that the child was kicking just floating in the water. Now, Titus is looking at this and he says, I thought that when sin appeared in Xanarkand and I woke up in spirit, that I'd be able to open my eyes and I'd be back in my home. I thought if I came in contact with sin again, it would just transport me back to Xanarkand. But all I saw that morning and that day was death and destruction. So now as the player, we are being introduced. This is a very real threat. You've just seen this entity completely eradicate this small little fishing hamlet. Now, Yuna and her entourage arrive in Kilika, and the villagers come up to her and say, can you please perform the sending? And Titus and the rest of the villagers go out onto this pier overlooking this destruction of huts, and there's bodies everywhere. And Titus kind of stands beside Lulu and he's like, what's a sending? Are we going somewhere? And Lulu is like, you're actually so fucking stupid. And then Titus is like, sorry, this is new to me. But Lulu can see that he's confused, and she says, the dead need guidance. Stricken by their own grief and death, they refuse to move on to the next passage. And if somebody who has died is not sent, like their soul isn't sent to where the spirits of the dead are kept, called the fire plane, they become fiends that prey on the living. So it's kind of strange to think about, but the enemies that you fought in Besaid coming up to Kilika, at one point there were people who were never sent.
Yeah.
Which is why whenever you kill them, their soul, their fireflies, so to speak, exit. So we watch Yuna perform this dance, and she's walking barefoot on the water, and it's this weird, not weird, it's kind of beautiful jig that she does. She's holding her summoner's staff, and the souls are dancing around her, and Titus is looking at this and he's like, I've never seen anything like this before. I've legitimately never seen anything like this. It's so ethereal, it's so otherworldly. And after Yuna performs the sending, Lulu kind of embraces her and she's like, no more tears next time, you know what your duty is. So you pray at the temple in Kilika, you get your second Aeon, and you're on your way to Luca. And Waka says he kind of invites you as being part of his blitzball team, the Besaid Aurochs, which are the worst blitzball team in Spira. They've never won a game. And it's actually, this is where you can choose, you play with the Besaid Aurochs at a part in the game. The blitzball kind of mechanics are kind of a bit shit. They're pretty bad. Like no amount of explaining will ever convince me that it's a perfect system, because it's not. It's really bad and broken. But I actually did manage to make the Besaid Aurochs win the tournament. But Yuna kind of pulls you across in Luca and is like, somebody just told me that they found Sir Orin in a cafe. And Titus is like, Orin? Like, the only Orin that I know was in Xanarkand. And Titus is like, wait, how do you know who he is? And Yuna is like, Orin was also my father's guardian. So now we know that Jecht and Orin have ties in Xanarkand and Spira. But are they the same people? They have to be the same people, don't they? They have to be.
Yeah.
They
It's a
have
coincidence if one is named that, but two?
to. And they know Yuna's dad, and we've just met Yuna. Can't be a coincidence.
It's all connected.
It's all connected. So right before the Blitzball tournament starts off, we are introduced to the leader of Yevon. His name is Maester Micah. The Blitzball tournament is celebrating his 50 years as leader of Spira and as leader of Yevon. And with him is a young Maester by the name of Seymour Guado from the Guado tribe of Guado Salam. We'll get into this guy much later because, my God, there's so much to his character. And the mental thing is that Seymour, Titus, and Yuna, the parallels and similarities between all three are so, it's scary how similar they are. All three of them have very famous fathers. Titus with Jekt as a blitzball player, Yuna with Braska, who was a high summoner, and Seymour with his father, Jiskel, who was the leader of the Guado tribe and also a member of the Yevon clergy, the high Yevon clergy. But the other thing is that all three of these father figures or fathers, two of them are definitely dead and one of them is maybe not dead.
Yeah.
Right? So Seymour Guado kind of comes out and he says, "It is my honor to be here, and recognizing the fortnight anniversary of my poor father's death, I am honored to be here. It's a pleasure meeting you all." And he kind of looks towards Yuna, and the both of them have that kind of eye contact. So the Blitzball tournament kind of goes on. I'm not going to mention everything that, as I said at the start of the video, every single thing that happens. I'm only going to mention the main facts and the main things that happen, because the video could go on for ages, but we don't want it to go on for ages. So I'm only mentioning like the main highlights that happen. So obviously stuff happens in Luca with Yuna being kidnapped by the Al Bhed as part of a ransom. I'm not going to get into that because you do rescue her and whatever. The Blitzball Stadium is attacked by fiends. And Oren from Zanarkand comes through, and he has his huge sword hanging off his back. And while there's fiends attacking, people are running past him, but he's just standing there like, yeah, I'm a fucking badass. And he cuts the fiends down, no problem. So with Oren as Waka and Titus, you meet him and you hold off some enemies. And Waka is like, "Sir Oren, oh my God." And Titus is like, "Ah, how do you know him?" And Waka is like, "You don't know Sir Orn, the most famous guardian in all of Spira?" And Titus looks across to Orn and is like, "I'm going to get you. You know more than you're letting on." But I think the moment that kind of exemplifies Seymour Guado's power. I've mentioned this before in the Anima and Seymour video that we did on the save point, along with some of the hidden Aeons. Seymour Guado summons his own Aeon called Anima, which is this two towering monstrosity of an Aeon. It's huge, and its arms are kind of binded together, and it's shackled almost. It's basically summoned from an anchor from the heavens down into the abyss, and it pulls her up. And Anima completely eradicates all the fiends in the area. And Yuna is looking at this like, oh my God, look at how powerful Seymour Guado is. And Seymour is standing there, he's looking across and he's like, I've saved everybody. But Anima is this powerful dark Aeon with no problem at all. Just in the blink of an eye or the tilt of the head, the fiends are wiped out completely. Titus meets up with Orn and is like, this is all your fault. Look at this. Zanarkand is destroying them. We're here and I don't know what's going on. It's your fault that you brought me here. What's your problem? And Orn starts laughing. And Titus is like, you know what? Fuck you. Who are you anyway? Like, who are you? And Orn is like, ask me anything you want. And Titus is like, you knew my old man, didn't you? And he's like, yep. And Titus is like, you knew Braska as well. Yuna's like, you knew him too, didn't you? He's like, yeah, that's correct. And Titus is like, that can't be possible. There's no way that can be possible. And Orn is like, nothing impossible about it. And then he eloquently goes into this beautiful monologue sequence where he says, 10 years ago, myself, Braska, and Jekt, we all fought sin together. The being that's a threat to spirit that can wipe out cities. We fought sin together. And whenever somebody, like a summoner, for example, whenever When Braska defeated Sin, it brought forth this 10-year period where Sin is gone completely, but it always regenerates. And that period of quietness is called the calm. So everything is nice and calm, no threats, nothing like that. And Titus is like, that can't be true. I've known you since I was a child. And Oren looks across and he says, it's strange though, isn't it? When we were in Xanarkand, I kind of felt something when we were being pulled into Sin, don't you think? And Titus is like, don't say it. And Oren is like, it's true. Sin is Jecht. Sin is your father. And Titus is like, that can't be true. Like that can't be true. It's not possible. Like, how is that possible? And Oren is like, time will show you that what I'm saying is true. But have you ever questioned why Sin is so violent? Why Sin destroys everything? And Titus is like, I don't get what you're saying. And Oren says something along the lines of, it's because Jecht wants you to stop him. So I'm going to hold that there for a second, and I'll come back to the point. Everything will come full circle. So Titus and the player are still like, hang on a second. So my dad is now this flying whale monstrosity that destroys cities. How did this happen? You know, how does that work? So, like what I mentioned about when Sin, again, I'm very quickly skipping a lot of stuff here. When Sin attacked Kilika, I suppose that's when we saw its full, well, not full, it's just how visceral and dangerous that this being is. I think the antithesis of Sin's power really comes ahead in what's known as Operation Mi'ihen. So Operation Mi'ihen is basically a joint operation between the Crusaders that I mentioned in Besaid and the Al-Bed, who are the Machina scavengers who only believe in the true power of technology. But Yevon have always been saying that Machina is what caused Sin to appear in the first place. So why is it that these holy warriors of Yevon and these tech scavengers are joining together? And it's kind of like a morality thing. It's like, well, what's the story here? So your party end up going to a place called the Mushroom Rock Road, where they're going to draw Sin in with Sin Spawn. They're these fiends that fall off Skin's hide. The Crusaders have been capturing these Sin Spawn around Spira and are going to lead Sin in, because Sin always returns for its spawn. If that makes any sense, like, it's basically like these monsters that fall off Sin's hide. Sin sends them out to basically cause a ruckus. Sin will come back and collect them. So the Crusaders and the Al-Bed have been gathering these Sin Spawn around Spira in an attempt to lure Sin in. And when they lure Sin in, they're going to bombard Sin with the ancient Machina, the Machina cannons. Now, does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so 10 years ago, maybe not 10 years ago, 2 years ago, I think it was, Chapu, Waka's brother, had fought Sin with a Machina weapon. He had said to Waka, no, I don't want this poxy fucking sword. I'm going to go across and join the Crusaders and the Al-Bed and use their weapons to fight Sin. So Waka has such a hatred for the Al-Bed because he sees that it was their weapons that killed his brother. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, Waka. Oh,
yeah.
Man.
So Waka is very xenophobic and racist towards the Al-Bed because he sees it was their technology that not only caused Sin to arrive in the first place, but also was his brother's downfall and death. So Maester Seymour is there overseeing the operation along with another Maester of Yevon. So I'm going to make this a little bit more easier to understand. So let's take Yevon, the religion, as like a brainstorm. Okay, so we have Yevon in the circle in the middle, and there's 4 Maesters of Yevon. Okay, 2 of them I've mentioned already. We have Maester Keenock, who is the older Japanese-looking guy who has been ruling over the church for 50 years. Okay. Then we have Maester Seymour, who I mentioned already, who took over for his father. Okay. Then we have Maester Kelk Ronso, who is also a member of the Ronso tribe that Kamari is from.
Right.
And then we have another guy called Maester Wen Keenock. And when Keenock is in charge of the warrior monks, so we have the Crusaders and the warrior monks, but the warrior monks are kind of like a step above the Crusaders. They're still warriors of Yevon, but he oversees them. Turns out that Keenock and Oren are best friends. Oren used to be a member of the warrior monks, but he was excommunicated from the warrior monks for not marrying the daughter of a high priest of Yevon. So he was just about to come to the upper, Oren was about to come to the upper echelons of Yevon. He climbed the ranks as a warrior monk, but then was like, I don't want to get married at such a young age. So when Keenock took over Oren's place, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're at the Mushroom Rock Road and they're just about to begin the operation. And Waka is like, he goes to one of the cannons, the Albed cannons, and it's like, stupid piece of shit, and he kicks it. And he starts punching it and taking his anger out on it. And Titus is like, wow, Waka really doesn't like those machines, does he? And Lulu was like, his brother. He left the sword that Waka gifted him in Besaid and fought with an Albed cannon instead and was crushed by sin and left on a beach. So you can understand it. And Waka is like, he's so pissed off at this operation. It completely defied, like he's so into Yevon as a doctrine.
Yeah.
And now he's like, hang on a second, what are the Maesters of Yevon doing in here with the Albed and these machines? Why are the warrior monks here? What the fuck is going on? This is what caused Sin to come here in the first place. And Yuna steps forward, just like, even though it might go against the teachings of Yevon, the Crusaders and the Albed just want peace for Spira. Like, so sure, like, just let this happen. And Oren is like, why don't you ask him instead? And Maester Seymour walks through. And Waka is like, excuse me, sir, Maester Seymour. And Seymour was like, please, no, just talk to me as if I was a friend of yours. And Waka is like, doesn't this go against the teachings of Yevon? Why is it that the Albed are here and we're using Machina in the same place as people who follow Yevon? Shouldn't you stop them? Like, why aren't you stopping them? And Seymour was like, it's true, I really should, shouldn't I? Waka, pretend you didn't see them. And Waka is like, pardon me, Maester Seymour, but that's something that like a maester of your caliber shouldn't say. Pretend I didn't say it. So Seymour is like, shut your face. So Sin appears, and if you thought the destruction of Kilika was bad,
oh no.
You see this line of warriors on these chocobos, which are like the horses of the Final Fantasy franchise. They've appeared in every single game. They're basically these gigantic, I suppose, chickens.
Yes.
For use of a better word. And they're all lined up against Sin appears because the Sin spawn were drawing it into the area. And the Albed machines absolutely blast the bollocks out of Sin. But Sin creates this kind of force field around itself, much like it did in Zanarkand. So the bullets can't get through, but Sin's attacks can get through. And boy, let me tell you, this creature annihilates the warrior monks, absolutely destroys the Albed machines. Like, within the space of about 30 seconds, 2,000 people are dead. So after the aftermath, Oren looks over to when Keenock is and is like, "You satisfied?" And Keenock's like, "What do you mean?" And Oren says, "It's funny, isn't it, that those who survived believed in Yevon's teachings, yet those who defied Yevon's teachings in the name of your religion, they all died." And Keenock is like, "Oren, where have you been the last 10 years? And Oren is like, "Fulfilling a promise I once made to a friend, and I'm glad it wasn't you." And he walks off. And he finds Titus, and he pulls him across, and he's like, "Now do you realize that Sin is Jecht?" And Titus is like, yeah, you know, for a while there, I thought I could sense him. And Oren is like, do you understand what just happened here? Why he killed so many people? Why this operation was a failure? It's not because of Yevon or anything like that. Jecht is proving a point. He wants you to stop him. He wants you to break the cycle that's going on here. So, Maester Seymour Guado says to Yuna, I'll be your pillar of strength whenever you need me. So once again, kind of skipping ahead rather quickly here. You end up in Guado Salam, which is the Guado home. You bump into Riku, as a matter of fact, from the Albed from the start of the game, and she joins your team. Yuna asks Riku to join with Oren's permission. You end up in Guado Salam, and this is the home of the Fireplane, which, as I said, in Kilika, this is where all the dead spirits go to. And you meet with Maester Seymour, and he invites you into his manor, and you enter this room where it's almost like a giant hologram, and he says that this room is the projections of the dead from those souls wandering the Fireplane. And you end up in Zanarkand, where we played in the beginning of the game. And Titus is like, he looks around and he's like, I know that place. Wait, we're in Zanarkand. And Seymour Guado says, correct. Zanarkand, the wondrous Machina city of the dead, destroyed 1,000 years ago by sin. And it kind of deflates Titus a bit, like, fucking hell, is this everybody's saying this to me, is this what really happened? Seymour whispers something into Yuna's ear and then walks off, and Yuna, being all flustered, says to her party, he just asked me to marry him.
All right.
And Oren, it gets mental here, right? And Oren looks across and says, why, like, you know, Yuna's duty as a summoner is to receive the final Aeon and defeat sin. If this is part of a play that you're trying to write here, forget about it, because it's not going to happen. And Seymour says, that may be true, but the actors still have to play their parts. And Oren says, he looks to the party and he's getting kind of agitated. He's like, we're leaving, let's get out of here. And Yuna kind of runs off. Right as they're leaving the manor, Seymour goes, Sir Oren, why are you still here? And Oren looks across and Seymour says, oh, I beg your pardon. It's just that we Guado are very keen to the scent of the Fireplane. I'm going to leave that there. So, I promise you this will come full circle. So, you're outside Seymour's manor, and Yuna says, I'm going to go take a visit to the Fireplane, and it's a place where, as I said, the dead souls go to wander in the afterlife. And you're standing beside Yuna, and she thinks about her father. Lord Braska appears in front of her, and it's almost like they're having a conversation with each other. Waka goes with you, and he thinks about Chapu. Chapu appears, and again, he's the image of Titus, except with kind of short reddish hair. And Yuna calls Titus over, and she's like, do me a favor, call out for Jecht. Call out for your dad. And Titus is thinking to myself, it's like, if I call out for him, he's not going to appear. He's sin. And Yuna says, don't worry, he's not going to appear, I guarantee you, which means he's alive. And Titus is like,
if you only knew.
If you only knew. And Titus is like, you know, if he was here, I'd probably just smack him one.
Yeah.
Yuna is like, why do you hate him so much? And Titus says, it was just, he always used to leave whenever I was a child, and whenever me and my mother, Titus's mother, appears.
Oh.
And it's like, oh God, in the fields. And Titus is like, Mom, but what are you doing here? And Yuna says, she must have just accepted death after your father disappeared. And Titus goes into this gorgeous monologue, and he says that in Zanarkand, the neighbor next door said that when, you know, the allegory of the two lovebirds, when a lovebird dies, their partner just suddenly just gives up and wants to join them. And he's thinking maybe that's what happened with my mother. That when Jack went missing, that she just gave up life, which is why she's here. You exit the fireplane anyway, and out of nowhere, Lord Jiskel, Seymour's father, kind of appears in this spirit kind of form, and he's kind of groaning. And there's some Guado tribes people there, and they're like, Lord Jiskel, what's going on here? And Oren is like, Una, you have to send him right now. And she sends Lord Jiskel back to the fireplane, and he drops a sphere. And as they're leaving the fireplane, they're discussing what happened and why was Lord Jiskel outside of the fireplane. And Oren immediately says it was because he died an unclean death. So naturally the game progresses on, and you go to where Macalania Temple is, which Seymour had said to some of the Guado tribes members, tell Una to come to Macalania Temple when she has her answer if she wants to marry me or not, because I need to go there and pray. He's the high priest of the temple. You go to Macalania, and Una kind of runs ahead into the Cloister of Trials to meet Seymour, and she drops her sphere that Lord Jiskel had dropped at the fireplane, and you read it or you watch it. It's a little hologram of Lord Jiskel saying his will, basically. And he says, what I'm about to tell you is the unclouded truth. I swear it upon my honor as a Guado and as a maester of Yevon. I have tried to protect my son, but all I see is blackness and anger in his heart. I could not protect his mother and him from the Guado, and I could not protect them from Yevon. And I can see whenever I speak to him. Now, this happened a fortnight ago. I can see whenever I speak to him or address him that I know what's going to happen. If you're watching this, I've been killed by my own son. So Seymour Guado committed patricide in order to take his place as a leader of the Guado and a leader of Yevon. So there was a reason why this happened, right? So you find Seymour. I promise you I'm going to come back to all of what I've said when I said I'm freezing this. I promise you I'm going to come back to it. I just don't want to extend this video for longer than it already is. Fair. So you meet Seymour, you defeat him, and you basically question him on what the sphere was and all this kind of thing. When you defeat him, the Guado who are in the temple refuse Una to send him, so he's dead, but he's alive. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you end up having battled your way out of Macalania because they're now holding you as the reason why Seymour is dead. You fight a fiend on the lake, and once the fiend kind of dies, he falls backwards, and the party that you're in fall underneath the lake, but there's no water under there. It's all frozen. It's like a frozen over crevasse.
Oh, yes.
So Una is with you, and she says, I need to get to Bevel, which is the capital of Spira, and tell Maester Michael what's happened. Right as she's saying this, though, you can hear the hymn of the faith in the background. It's prevalent in all the temples that you go to. The hymn of the faith stops singing, and out of nowhere, Sin appears and transports you to another place, which you wake up from in a place called the Beaconell Desert. But right before you do, Titus is having a conversation with his dad, and Titus first of all asks, "You're Jack, aren't you? You're my old man." And immediately, it's kind of like a hallucination that he has. Immediately, he sees visions of Zanarkand, and that's when he knows, okay, you're him, you're my dad. So you go to, you wake up in Beaconell Island. Riku tells you that the Albed have set up a home here. When you like a capital city of the Albed, when you go there, it's being attacked by the Guado and Yevon, because they're looking for Una. So when you get there, you end up in a place that's in the Albed home called the Summoner's Sanctum. It turns out that the Albed have been kidnapping summoners around Spira and keeping them in this place to stop them completing their pilgrimage. And Titus is like, why would the Albed do that? If they're kidnapping summoners, no one's going to be able to defeat Sin. The summoner is supposed to do their pilgrimage, they defeat Sin, and then if it comes back, they do it all again. And it gets really quiet, and you can just see people like And then Kamari steps forth, and it's one of the few times he speaks in the game, but he's like, "It is too quiet." Kamari leaves because it's really awkward.
Yeah.
So you meet some of the summoners that you've met on your travels, and this fucking broke me. This really got me the first time I played it, like all those years ago. Riku says that if Yuna gets the final summoning in Zanarkand, the ruins of Zanarkand, the final Aeon is going to kill her.
Well, shit.
Tidus is like, "What are you talking about?" And Riku says, "That's what a summoner's duty is. They get all the mini Aeons up until they get to Zanarkand. And when they get the final Aeon, when they summon it, the final Aeon breaks the link between the summoner and the Aeon. The summoner dies, and the final Aeon goes and battles Sin." And it's that moment where now, originally for this game, the developers and the writers had toyed around with the idea of everybody's life stops when they hit 17, but they couldn't really create a story around that. So they said, what if we had this kind of pilgrimage that people who are 17 go on, and when they reach the end of their pilgrimage, they die. But it's that moment when Tidus remembers that he's been saying to Yuna all these times, "Oh, after we defeat Sin, let's go to Zanarkand, let's go to my place, let's go watch a blitzball game, let's do this and that." And Yuna, like, knowing that he's not from this world, is like, "Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, I can't wait to do that."
Sparing his feelings, basically, like
protecting him from the truth.
Oh, you know, I haven't cried enough today. Yeah.
It's rough. So you leave the Albed home on an Albed airship, the same airship you found with Riku at the beginning of the game. Yeah, so nice little bow on that tie-in. They get to Bavel, and Yuna is being married off to Seymour. Essentially, he's still alive. He's unsent, but he's still alive. His ties to Spira are keeping him from transgressing into the far plane. But the reason why Yuna is marrying him is so she can get close enough to send him. You know? Yeah. So the airship crashes into Bavel. You fight your way through a bunch of warrior monks. Maester Micah is there. Maester Keenock is there. And as Yuna is sending Seymour, Maester Micah is like, stop. Do you not value your friends' lives? And they can see that they're being held up at gunpoint. And Maester Micah is like, if you choose to do what a summoner must do, you're sacrificing your friends' lives. Flawless impression, I must say. Just absolutely flawless impression.
I was inside the game. You captivated me. I'm there. I'm inside Spirit.
So the goons, the goons capture, tried to capture your party, and Yuna kind of dives off the ledge of where the ceremony is being held, but she survives because she summons one of her Aeons to catch her before she falls. Good thinking. So Tidus is like that spoiled child. Ornn is holding him back, and Tidus is like, "Let me at Seymour. I want to get at him," you know. And Ornn is like, "Just shut up a second. Just come with us." So I think it's Riku who asks, where would Yuna go in Bavel? Because you have to remember that Bavel is the capital, but there's also a temple there. This is the last.
Oh yeah.
This is the last Aeon that she needs before getting to Zanarkand. So now this is where the game does like a big slap across the face. So all the while we're playing as Tidus, we're unaccustomed to Spira. We're unaccustomed to their traditions, their customs, all this kind of thing. When they get into Bavel Temple, there's machines everywhere.
Okay.
And Waka is like, "What's a Makinga doing in a temple?" And Ornn is like, "The true face of Yevon. They betrayed their own teachings." So while Yevon is preaching to Spira, never use Makinga, never use this, never use that, in their own temples, the highest temple of Spira, machines everywhere.
Do as I say, not as I do.
You nailed it. So
some bitches.
So you get to the antechamber where Yuna is praying, and it's sealed off.
Yeah. And
Tidus is trying to open the door, and Waka is like, "You can't go in there. You can't go in there." And Tidus is like, "I'll tell you what. Fuck your taboos. Are you still believing in Yevon after all the shit we've just been through? Help me open this bloody door and let's get Yuna. She's more important than some fake doctrine. Kamari helps you lift open the door and you go in and you see Yuna praying. And the being she's praying to is this child decked out in ornate purple robes. The same child from Xanarkand. This child is the faith of Bahamut. So in each temple where the summoners go to pray, they're praying to these statues that have living souls in there that have given their life up to help summoners on their quest. So there's not one singular Aeon. So for example, Joker could go to Besaid and pray and get Velafor and fuck off somewhere else. Shepherd could go to Besaid and pray and pray there and get Velafor. It's like a part of their, it's part of the fate's soul being kind of portioned out to summoners, basically.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So each summoner will have carbon copy Aeons to the ones who came before them and after them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
You're captured then by the warrior monks and you're in a cell with Orin, and Titus is like, why is it that so much of Spira revolves around death? And Orin is like, yes, the spiral of death. He says summoners fight for their lives on the way to temples, praying to dead spirits to give them power to fight sin and die in the process. And you're basically put on trial in front of the other members of Yevon, the four members, Maester Micah, Maester Keenock, Kelk Ronso, and Seymour Guado. And Yuna is like, the only reason why I wanted to get married to Seymour was to send him to the fireplane. He killed his father. And Maester Micah is like, okay. And Yuna is like, we fought Seymour because of this. Seymour is already dead. And Lulu says, surely it's a summoner's duty to send the dead to the fireplane. Then it gets really quiet, and Maester Micah goes, send the dead? Is that what it is? Send the dead to the fireplane? And he starts laughing. And all of a sudden, Micah's fireflies start coming out of him. Every member of Yevon, apart from Kelk Ronso, are unsent. And it's Maester Keenock who says it. He says, better to be guided by the judgment of the dead than be misled by the rules of the living. So Orin says, it's funny, isn't it? That even the Maesters of Yevon that people are praying to and believe in, you're being ruled over by dead beings. That's brilliant. So you escape Bavel, and if anything, I just want to talk about this one part before we go on a bit of a pause and I discuss a bit of the history behind Spira and what led to this.
Great.
So Yuna has a crisis of faith essentially, and she's been like, because she's been brought up in Yevon's teachings that you have to do this, and this to lead a good life. As a summoner, you must complete these doctrines and this. And now she just realizes that the people that she's been following have been dead all along. That when she completes her pilgrimage, she's going to die. And she has that crisis of faith that Yevon has betrayed her. Like, was her father's pilgrimage for nothing? Was it all for naught?
Yeah.
So after you escape Bavel, you are in Macalania Forest. And Yuna is nowhere to be seen. And the party say, oh, Titus, maybe you should go and have a word with her. Titus is like, yeah, I don't know what to say though. Like, I'm an outsider here. Now Titus hasn't seen her since he's or hasn't spoken to her rather since he's had the revelation that the final Aeon is going to kill her.
Yeah.
So you end up following Yuna, and she's in this lake up to her waist, and it's a gorgeous kind of surrounding where the moonlight is nestled high, and it's the beams kind of coming through the trees. It looks like there's crystals along the surface of the water. It's very peaceful, very beautiful. And Titus gets into the water himself and swims over to her. And he said, they told me everything. They told me what's going to happen to you. And here I was making all these plans about us going to Zanarkand, and I didn't realize what would happen to you, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I made you sad about that. And she goes, I wasn't sad. I was happy. I made you happy. And Una starts questioning if she's going to go on with this pilgrimage.
Yeah.
And Titus is like, why don't you just stop? Like, why don't you just stop? And he says, hey, I'll tell you what we can do. Why don't we go to Zanarkand? He's still believing that he can get back home.
Yeah.
And she's like, and we can go to a blitzball game? And he's like, yeah, we can go to a blitzball game and we'll stay up all night. And he says this monologue. And Una's theme is playing in the background, this very innocent, gentle theme. And he says to her, let's go to the docklands just before sunset. And you can see the sun coming up just over the horizon. And it gets brighter and brighter until it's almost rose-colored. And the city is just starting to wake up. And it's really beautiful. I would love to take you there. And Yuna's like, yeah, that sounds really nice. He's like, so come on, why don't you just stop your pilgrimage and let's do this? And he has his back to her while he's talking. It's almost like he can see his old home.
Yeah. Oh.
And he turns around and Yuna's crying. And she's like, I can't. I just can't. And she's weeping. And it's that moment where it's a gorgeous cutscene where Titus is looking at her. And he says, Yuna. And he puts his hand on her shoulders and embraces her, and they kiss. And it's basically like they're just letting their feelings come to life.
Oh.
Absolutely, to this day, it's an absolute probably one of the most beautiful cutscenes I've ever seen in my life. Where you have these, like Yuna is having a crisis of faith and she's taking comfort in Titus. Titus is a stranger in this world and he's comforting the woman he loves. And it's beautiful. So I suppose that leads us then, once they're on their way, Yuna chooses to continue on her pilgrimage. And they end up at Mount Gagazat, which is the gateway to Zanarkand. Zanarkand is literally on the other side. And Oren is standing there and he's looking at this and he says, I haven't been here in 10 years. And Titus is like, so what were you feeling at this moment? Because Titus is looking for a way to keep Yuna alive. And 10 years ago, Oren was looking for a way to keep Braska alive.
Yeah.
You know? And Oren was like, 10 years ago, I looked at this peak and I just remember saying to myself, how can I keep Braska alive? How can I do this? And Titus is like, what was my old man doing? And Oren was like, honestly, I wasn't even paying attention to what Jack was doing. All I had in this moment was, how am I going to keep Braska alive? Because I know when we get to Zanarkand, he'll accept the final Aeon and then he's going to die.
Yeah.
And it's a gorgeous kind of moment where Oren is remembering those sequences, trying to keep Braska alive. So this is a moment where I said I was going to make everything come full circle. And I'm going to pop the main story right now and dive a little bit on the history of Spira, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep
Let's go. Before we start the history, actually, I'd like to clarify for anybody watching. I've been reacting to a lot of what's been said by Joker. A lot of it I've experienced before. I've played through the game couple of times, but it's been a few years, so it feels to me like I'm hearing it all again for the first time and seeing it all. But the great thing is that I'm experiencing it for the first time, but I'm not. I'm visualizing everything you're describing to me.
I hope I'm describing it as well as I can.
You are. You absolutely are, and it's great because you describe these scenes that they're like locked away in the back of my memory.
Sure.
Of a game I played a few years ago, and then as you talk about them, they come to life again.
Okay.
So
thank you.
It's like deeply emotional for me now. It's, you know, you're describing as these things, and they're right in front of me, and
which is a testament, I suppose, to the game developers and how they were able to weave such a beautiful story that even though they're locked in the back of your mind, like this happened. I experienced this 20 years ago.
Yeah. And
even when I'm talking about it, I can see them in almost flashes. So for me to be able to re-describe them to you and you knowing what I'm talking about, it's such a high compliment for you to give me. So thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely. And
I hope I'm describing it as coherently and as concise as I can. I am skipping across a lot, but
it's a big game, to be fair, and I think it's a testament to, well, both your descriptions and to the game itself, that I don't have a nostalgic connection to this game. You do, I don't, and yet the story is still coming across really well. I can visualize little minute details on like characters' costumes and weapons and the environments, and like when you say the word Zanarkand, I immediately know the visuals and how it's all looks and sounds and everything like that.
Yeah.
When you describe where the far plane is, I remember, that the tree. Everyone lives in this gigantic tree city kind of thing, and like I remember I remember the routes I took around it, and the houses and everything like that. It really stuck with me.
Quite organic, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things that like the visual design and world design and everything is so well conveyed to the player.
Yeah.
That even though I haven't played it for ages, it stuck with me. Even when you were talking about the trials, and I was like, oh god, yeah, the fucking trials. Oh, I immediately remembered those being an absolute ball ache.
Yeah.
And like visually, like I remember going through them and like the tiny little tunnels, and that one where you're on like the rail thing moving around up and down.
That's in Bevel. Yeah.
Yeah. And like it again, it's something that's kind of like, I played that casually like 5-6 years ago, and I still remember all of these great little details about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to mention that before you got into the history, because it's really, I think the game is a powerhouse in kind of conveying so many little details and big details, and I love it for that. I really do.
And I'm glad that the way I'm conveying it is unlocking those memories that you have. And I think I'm going to unlock them a little bit further. It's a part of the game that is kind of skimmed on, but a lot of the Ultimania novels and encyclopedias do touch on quite a bit. So we've talked about how Sin destroyed Zanarkand 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And naturally, we're presuming that it's Tidus's Zanarkand that was destroyed 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
That's not entirely the case. In fact, it's not the case. So there's a part when you're coming into Zanarkand where you come across this mountain wall, and there are beings there, like human beings, frozen into position. And there's this blue energy being almost sucked out of them, and it's powering something. So they're all frozen into this really obscure positions. And Yuna is the one who says it. She's like, these are faith, much like the faith in the temples.
Yeah.
And it's like somebody is drawing immense power from these. And she looks across to Oren, and Oren is like, I don't know. He's kind of that character where it's like, he knows when he talks, you listen. But Riku is the one who's like, you know something, don't you? And he's like, this is your story. I'm not a narrator. And he walks off.
Oh.
So these faith are being used for something. So this is where, as I said, I'm going to take a quick pause on the main franchise and dive a little bit more into the history of Spira.
Yeah.
So we've talked about how Sin destroyed Zanarkand 1,000 years ago. So 1,000 years ago, long before the teachings of Yevon, long before any of that, there was a holy war that happened, and it was between two nations. You had Bevel, which was the capital, and then you had Zanarkand, which is at the edge of the world. Now, take Tidus's Zanarkand out of the equation completely here, okay? So we had a place called Zanarkand and Bevel, and these two were the Machinga cities of Spira, but they were kind of at war with each other. And as graphic as this sounds, it was kind of like both Bevel and Zanarkand are saying, they've got bigger dicks than us, we need to bomb them. Do you know what I mean? So let's take Bevel, for example. So Bevel were solely reliant on Machinga to be the powerhouse of Spira, okay? On the other side, you had Zanarkand, who their beings of power were the summoners. Now, they weren't summoning aeons, they were summoners in terms of mages. They would use black magic and white magic and things like that. So a holy war happened between Bevel and Zanarkand, where Bevel was going to completely wipe out Zanarkand so they could be the true primary alpha species of Spira, and they wouldn't have to ever worry about Zanarkand doing an uprising or anything like that.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. So, on the eve of what would to be Zanarkand's destruction, the leader of Zanarkand was a man by the name of Yu Yevon. And to preserve his city, he wanted a Zanarkand that would never sleep. He wanted a Zanarkand that would never be discovered. But he wanted to preserve the memories of Zanarkand and preserve the city. So he ordered the citizens and the summoners to give their spirits up to become a faith, so he could use their essence to summon a new city. While he was doing this, though, Yu Yevon had created this entity which was given the name Sin. Sin is basically like an aeon, it's a summoning. Okay? And he gave this, he gave this aeon called Sin 3 tasks. The first task was to keep Zanarkand, the summoning of Zanarkand, safe. The second was to not let anybody discover Zanarkand. And the third was to destroy any city that was too reliant on Machina. Okay?
Okay.
So this was all part of Yu Yevon's scheme, that he was going to create a new Zanarkand that nobody could find and use the spirit essence of its citizens as the energy source to keep this city alive.
Jesus.
But he would put this dream Zanarkand way out at sea where nobody could find it, and its protector would be in the water at all time, its protector being Sin. Okay? But when this was going on, the summoning kind of got out of control a little bit.
Okay.
So as Yu Yevon was putting this plan to place, he gave his daughter the means to quell Sin's wrath, because it would be here for all eternity. So this will come full circle. So he said to his daughter at the time, I'm going to give you the power to pacify Sin while it's rebuilding its armor. It'll take 10 years for it to rebuild its armor, but I'm going to give you a ways to quell its wrath. Yu Yevon's daughter, her name was Unaleska. Okay? So now let's go back to what Yu Yevon's mission was, because it's really important.
Yeah.
The first thing was he would create a dream-like Zanarkand where nobody could find. That's step number 1. Step number 2 was he would have it pushed way out at sea where nobody could find it, but its protector would always be nearby, which is Sin.
Yeah.
The guardian, you could say. And 3, he would order Sin or command Sin to destroy any Machina cities, to stop them relying on heavy technology. He didn't want his version of Zanarkand to be ever found, ever. He wanted to preserve the life, the citizens. He wanted to preserve that state. The summoning got way out of control and Yu Yevon died during it, but his essence was, I suppose, used as the core for this being called Sin.
Yeah.
So Yu Yevon is trapped in Sin. And all he knows now what to do is just to keep summoning. His mind is broken completely. That's his only objective, is to keep Zanarkand alive and stop a Machina city. So he went nuts because of this.
Yeah.
During the process of the summoning, though, because Zanarkand was a Machina city, the original Sin destroyed it. So when they say Sin destroyed Zanarkand 1,000 years ago, it legitimately destroyed Zanarkand 1,000 years ago. So now the real Zanarkand is destroyed, but the dream Zanarkand is now made way out at sea. So there's 2 Zanarkands, right? Titus is a product of the dream Zanarkand. Okay? So remember when I said that Jecht went out to sea for training?
Yeah.
Sin found them and transported them to Zanarkand. But because Sin is the pure manifestation of fireflies and magic, whenever somebody comes in contact with Sin, if they're a dream or if they're not a real person, immediately they become a real person. So when Sin dropped off Jecht 10 years ago in Bevel.
Yeah.
Jecht was like, where the fuck am I? What's going on? Where's my home, Zanarkand? He was in prison because he was a lunatic. Braska had found out that somebody had been preaching that they were from Zanarkand and went to visit Jecht in a prison cell and was basically like, you're the man who said you're from Zanarkand? And Jecht is like, I need to get back home because I have no idea where I am. And Braska says, well, as a matter of fact, I'm on a journey to Zanarkand and maybe we can get you home from there. So do you want to join me? And Jecht is like, get me out of this prison cell. I'll do anything. Right behind Braska, you hear, you're actually, Lord Braska, you're putting your trust and your knowledge and your guidance into this drunkard. It's a young Orin who didn't want Jecht with him at all because he just thought he was nuts. Whereas Jecht is a product of Dream Zanarkand,
Yeah.
came in contact with Sin, and ended up in Spira, right? So going back to Dream Zanarkand, so the best way I can describe it to you is, have you ever been to a place and you remember it very fondly? It could be like an old college that you went to or whatever, and you remember that it was a certain color.
Yeah.
And when you go back years later, it's like, oh, I thought that was brown, and it's not. It's white. So in Dream Zanarkand, the citizens and the inhabitants in Dream Zanarkand are the memories of the real people of the real Zanarkand. So they're dreaming up people that they've met in real life, but their hair color might be different, their eye color might be different.
Oh.
Right? So Titus is a product of Dream Zanarkand, but he doesn't even believe that he's part of Dream Zanarkand. He thinks it's real, but it's not real. The real Zanarkand was destroyed 1,000 years ago. But before it was destroyed, Yu Yevon had created this Dream Zanarkand that can never be found. And the protector of Dream Zanarkand is Sin. But Sin has been indiscriminately just targeting cities all over Spira that might have a sniff of machines or whatever and destroying them, right? So it's been kind of a wide discussion among fans of the game, like where Dream Zanarkand really is, and it's not really discussed or talked about. But I believe that it's maybe a day's boat ride away from the ruins of Baj Temple where we end up.
Okay.
After Sin transports Titus to Spira. I believe they could be quite close to each other. So has what I said made sense there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating. As I said before, I've played the game a couple of times, so like a lot of this is in there.
Yeah.
But you're unlocking it. But then there's other, a lot of that I don't remember this. This is genuinely new, and I'm kind of like, oh, it all adds up.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? When you as the party, you see these beings frozen into position in this mountain wall in Gagazet, you touch it and you end up back in Dream Zanarkand as Titus.
Yeah.
You end up back in your home, and it's like, oh, we're back, cool. Oh, he finally got back to where he is. He might, well, Yuna's back there, but he'll get over her. But there's in your home, in one of the corners, is the child in the purple robes, and he's like, welcome home. And Titus is like, is this real? I think I'm dreaming. And the child is like, you're not dreaming, you are a dream.
Ah, fuck.
So the best way I can describe it is the main Aeons in the game are still dreaming up Zanarkand.
Yeah.
And the child says to Titus, we've been dreaming for so long. We've been conjuring up this place for 1,000 years. We're tired. Like, can you not let us rest?
Mm.
And Titus says, well, what happens if I let you rest? What's going to happen? And the child says, well, your Zanarkand, if it was still here, which it's not because it was destroyed, I'll get to that in a moment. If we stop dreaming, everything that's a product of our dreams are going to vanish. Which means that if the Faith stop dreaming, Titus is going to vanish.
Yeah.
So, right. Remember when you're playing as Titus and Dream Zanarkand gets attacked?
Yeah.
Okay. I want you to hold that thought a second. So we get to Zanarkand, the real Zanarkand in the end, And it kind of the scene repeats where like almost like the prologue of the game where Titus is looking out over this wide destroyed landscape. And he says, it's a city dead for 1,000 years, a city dead before my own eyes. The last chapter in Yuna's story. You get to where Yuna Leska is, and Oren says she's waiting for us. And Yuna is like, who's waiting for us? And Oren says, Yuna Leska, she awaits for you in the temple. And Yuna is like, but she died 1,000 years ago. And Oren is like, no, she's alive, about as much as alive as Seymour is. So whenever anybody has strong ties to spirit, they stay on as an unsent. So Maester Micah, for example, he's the leader of Yevon. He's unsent. He stays alive.
Yeah.
Seymour Guado has such strong ties to spirit. He stays alive. Yuna Leska is the one who births the final Aeon to summoners who make the pilgrimage there. She's still alive. So you get inside the temple, and it turns out that Yuna Leska is saying that there is no final Aeon.
Yeah.
You must choose one of your teammates to be the final Aeon. And Oren knew this all along. It cuts back to when Oren met Yuna Leska with Braska and Jekt, and he was protesting that Braska's death it's just not going to work. Like, sin will always come back. It's a continuous cycle every 10 years. So Titus is like, there has to be some way that we can kill sin without Yuna dying, or without there ever being a final Aeon. And they confront Yuna Leska about this. And Yuna Leska is basically saying that better to give people hope than to feed them the truth and let them deal with sorrow as their reality. And Yuna is like, but surely the teachings that we've been taught from such an early age are true. And Yuna Leska is like, no, sin will always come back. We're just going to let it sleep for 10 years. And Titus is like, well, fuck you. And takes the sword and is like, I'm not going to let Yuna die. And Oren delivers this masterful cutscene, this monologue. He says, now's the time to choose. Now, this is your moment. You either die and be free of pain, or you live and you fight your sorrow. Now is your moment, and you must choose right now. This is it. And they fight Yuna Leska. But now all of a sudden, the pathway of getting the final Aeon has gone along with Yuna Leska. So Oren pulls Titus across towards the end and is like, wait, there's something you must know. And Titus is like, I know what it is. It's about you, isn't it? And Oren says, I too am unsent. And Titus says, what happened? And Oren kind of puts his hand on Titus's chest and says, I want you to relive my memories. And it goes back to that moment where Jekt chose to be Braska's final Aeon, and he would become the core of the new sin.
Right.
And before he does, Jekt looks to Oren. It's all in first person. You're looking out from Oren's eyes. Jekt says, I want to ask you a favor, Oren. And Oren says, I'll do anything for you. Like Braska, Jekt, and Oren all became very, very close during Braska's pilgrimage, which is something that's never really fully explored in Final Fantasy X-2. Such a wasted fucking asset. I'm so pissed I didn't do it. So Jekt says, I want you to go and find my boy. He's such a crybaby. He's back in the other Zanarkand, and I need you to get there. And Oren is like, I've no idea how am I supposed to get to your Zanarkand? I don't even know where it is. And Jekt is like, I don't care if you don't know where it is. Just make me a promise that you'll go and look after my child, and you'll bring him to Spira, and we'll end the cycle together. Oren does. Jekt as Sin transports Oren to Dream Zanarkand, where Oren for 10 years looks after Titus. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh man.
Sin is the link between Dream Zanarkand and Spira.
Yeah.
So you, at the end of the game, basically you full on attack Sin with the Albed airship, which is kind of a funny thing because they were seen as the outsiders of Yevon, and yet they're the ones leading the charge against Sin without the final summoning. You meet Sin. First of all, you meet Seymour in there, who has been absorbed by Sin, and he's like, if I can get rid of everybody in Spira, there'll be no death or anything like that. He's very twisted in his own machinations, and it's kind of like that moment of, oh, fucking just die already, you know. Now I have made points about why Seymour became so messed up in the head. You can You can watch them in the videos previously on the save point. But you meet Jecht, and Jecht is like, I can't hear the hymn of the faith so clearly anymore. I'm starting to lose hold on sin here. I'm pretty soon I'm going to be sinful, like fully. And Titus is like, there's one thing I want to say to you, Dad. And Jecht is like, go on. And Titus is like, I hate you. I really hate you. And Jecht is like, I know. Anyway, Jecht becomes Braska's final Aeon in his Aeon form. It's a boss fight at the end of the game. Right as he's about to die, Jecht is in his son's arms, and he looks up and he's like, I told you, you're crying. And Yu Yevon appears. And it's like this, because you're told that like Yu Yevon is this summoner who is capable of summoning sin and is able to summon a city, and he's this fucking bug thing. He just appears out of nowhere. He's this bug thing. And it really just, I think it was just such a wasted asset, to be honest with you. So Yuna kind of summons all of the Aeons that have been gathered over their journey. So she summons Velafor, Ifrit, Shiva, Ixion, and Bahamut, and Yu Yevon takes over their Aeon form. So essentially you're killing off the Aeons. Because Bahamut's fate, the child, had said, when Yu Yevon comes forth, please summon us and we'll end this dream together. So you do that, and you defeat all of your Aeons who have been your companions. It's one of those cutscenes where it's Yuna is sending them all to the fireplane. And I'm just going to skip to the end of the game here. So you're on top of the airship, and Yuna is doing her sending dance, and Sin literally explodes into millions of fireflies and is sent to the fireplane. The Aeons and everything are being sent to the fireplane. It cuts down to Mount Dagazat, where you see all those people frozen into position, that their light goes out, that the dream is ending. And then it goes onto the airship, and Titus is looking around him, and he looks at his hands, and they're kind of fading in and out.
Oh.
And then they stop fading, and he looks across to Yuna, and she's like, I don't want to do it. And he's like, Yuna, I have to go. And he says, I'm sorry I couldn't show you Zanarkand. And right as he's walking past her, she runs to him and falls through him.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So she falls through him. And he has her back to her, because he tried to embrace her as she was running towards him, and she fell through him. And the last thing she says to him, as she stands up and she's crying, the last thing she says is, I love you. And Titus turns around, having hearing that, and walks up behind her, and as he's fading, puts his arms around her from behind and walks through her. So Titus runs. He jumps off the airship, and he ends up in the fireplane, where he passes by Braska, and he passes by Oren, who Yuna had sent already because he's undead. And the last thing he does is he high-fives Jecht, and they're in the fireplane. And the game ends basically with Yuna delivering this speech in Lucas, saying that sin is now truly defeated, and all the friends and memories that you've made during this time, never forget them. And that's where the game would end. The game ends there. So it's a lot to take in, and I've skimmed on a lot of stuff. But just, I suppose, to wrap up this video, I've talked an awful lot about Spira and what happens and what goes on. So let's just say, I'm not even going to look at Final Fantasy X-2, because that has nothing to do with what we've just spoken about. It does kind of lean a little bit more on what happens in the Machina Wars for about 10 seconds. But I'm not even going to look at X-2, because to me it doesn't exist. There is talks of Final Fantasy X-3 happening after the remake of Final Fantasy VII is completed. So we probably won't see that until 2028 or something like that. But it is being made. So it is being made. There's a script and everything, and I'm kind of a bit reticent to reading it. So just for yourself, Shepard, having discussed everything, or having heard everything I've discussed and spoken about, and I hope I've done it in some way a concise way to understand. There's so much to dig into in this game, but I've kind of highlighted the main points. If you were to do, let's say, a Final Fantasy continuation of Final Fantasy X, what would you do? Would you maybe go on and focus on life after Yuna's pilgrimage? Would you focus on the Machina Wars, would you maybe do a prequel and talk about Braska's journey? If you can, what would you do, or what wouldn't you do?
I feel like a prequel like Machina Wars or Braska would be really interesting.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. People might not be happy with this, but I would love, because I think Tidus and Yuna's relationship is so central to the Final Fantasy X experience. I know 10-2 kind of, I didn't play through a lot of it. I know it's Yuna's story, and like, don't get me wrong, I want to see more of Yuna. I think she's a great character. And I don't know if Tidus comes back into 10-2 in any way, shape, or form. That's
a point of contention amongst fans, because it is an optional ending you can get where he does become a real person. There's another ending in Final Fantasy X-2 when Bahamut, the child, says, "Oh, do you want to see him one last time?" and Tidus appears in the fireplane. So it's not canonically, it's unsure if he's still here or not.
Right.
So I don't know what way that would work.
Okay, well that's actually something I'd personally like to explore, because I'm a sucker for those reuniting storylines, you know, of long lost loves and shit like that. So I'd love, just as someone who's not as nearly as familiar with the game as many people, I'd love a story of, say, Yuna and the remaining team, Riku, Lulu, Waka, and sure, throw in Kamari for the crack. I would love to see them go on another pilgrimage of some kind, is to bring back Zanarkand.
Oh,
not just Tidus, but like the entirety of Zanarkand.
Zanarkand, or the real one?
The original Zanarkand.
Okay.
Before it was turned into a dream, in order to, save these people that were lost because of what happened and everything. And then, that would be, like, Yuna has a personal stake in it. She's bringing back Tidus, but there's also the greater good of, these people were wiped out in a horrible atrocity. So I think that would be something I'd like to kind of see, because it would, you'd be driven by the characters. But then there'd be also, you could bring up the kind of moral quandaries of like, wow, these people are long gone. The world has moved on since they've left. To bring back an entire city of Machina, like a city heavily dependent on Machina, and the city that arguably, is at the center of it, of all the heartache that came afterwards, with Sin and all that stuff. So a story about that, I don't know how you could end it. Do you end it with the case if they decide not to bring Zanarkand back and they make peace with the fact that what's in the past?
I suppose that actually would be a pretty good thing, is to see, like, if Yuna and the rest of her entourage could in some way revive the Zanarkand ruins. You could look at it as an interesting point on that way.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of, this big part of history that was lost.
Yeah.
And as I said, it kind of brings up that moral quandary of, like, do you leave the past behind? Do you move on?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot you could do with it that better writers than me could do with. So I think, for me anyway, that's something I'd like to see, like a concept that would be fun to explore. Well, what about you? What would you do?
Well, I suppose I'd love to see more about what the Machina Wars did, and how it literally had Spirit in the palm of their hand. Bevelle and Zanarkand, the original Zanarkand, of course. Like, again, 10-2 didn't really touch on it as much as I would have hoped. But personally, what I would have liked to see would be Braska, Jecht, and Auron's story of them doing their pilgrimage, because the one thing that all three of them have in common is they all died at the end for a cause that wasn't theirs. It was a false pilgrimage to give people hope when it would just happen again. And what I really do appreciate is, as Tidus, you can actually find Jecht's spears, like, that he has dotted around Spira, and it's Jecht almost in a mirroring way of Tidus kind of learning more about the history and the customs of Spira. So that's an interesting thing you could look at as well. Or you could go down the other route and say, well, what's Spira going to continue like without Sin? Because a lot of Spira was revolved around Sin, and Sin was revolved around Spira. Like 10-2 did kind of, in a way, touch on this, that like nobody believes in Yevon anymore, that there's factions in Spira with New Yevon and the Machina Guild and things like that. So I think the world is there to fully explore. But I don't think just like write something for the sake of writing it, that it needs to be a cash grab. And 10-2 is really guilty of that. They played an awful lot on people's expectations. Like, if this is going to be a direct continuation, be a direct continuation. And in some ways it is, and a lot of ways it isn't. Like, it turns out that Titus was modeled on this guy called Shuyan, who was a member of the Zanarkand citizens who wanted to save his lover Len from turning into a faith or so. I don't know. I didn't really play 10-2 enough to notice. I have a lot of gripes with that game. But what I did like about what 10-2 did was they kind of continued on. Life goes on after the final summit.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Because as you're saying, like, it's that idea of the world having to carry on in the aftermath of this like absolute abomination of sin, and how it affected everyone. How do you, like, you know, some people are kind of almost dependent on the tragedies, and that's just what they're accustomed to, you know.
Yeah,
it's like people after war, they don't know how to get like reintegrated into life, into society. So it'd be interesting to see that for sure.
Yeah.
I have a very important follow-up question.
Yes.
Unrelated really to what comes after Sin and Spira and Zanarkand and everything. Arguably the most important question we could ask about a Final Fantasy game. Who's the best waifu?
Futaba Sakura. You know what? I think just because it's my game, I'm going to say Yuna.
Yeah, fair. I can totally see why.
I think so. And like, I really want to say Aerith, but I don't know what's going to happen in the Final Fantasy VII remake.
Oh yeah,
so
fair.
I don't.
Okay, but specific to Final Fantasy X, anyway, you'll say Yuna.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about yourself?
Riku all the way.
Really?
I just think she's great personality, kind of the bubbly adventurer. Like Lulu, I think Lulu's a really cool character and everything, but she also scares the piss out of me.
Oh,
so I would say Riku. Like, Riku's that great balance between the two of like, she has an innocence to her, but she also doesn't take shit from people. I love her.
Her character arc really comes ahead in the Albed home, so to speak, when she's begging people to like, don't like. The reason why we're kidnapping summoners and keeping them safe is because we don't want any more cannon fodder being thrown at a cause that's just going to keep coming back.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I've always been a fan of the kind of the scavenger aesthetic of her character, and like it works really well into her how she plays. You know, the way you can steal items and then combine items and and all that stuff. But I also think, you know, the fact that she's at this core of kind of, because her place in the group is really interesting, because as you said, like, Waka is inherently racist against the Albed. She's also the first person Titus met in this new world. So like, he has a kind of a personal link to her.
Yeah.
Just little stuff about her character I think is really good, and just I really like about her.
Very fair.
Yeah. What about best? I don't know. What's the male waifu? Husbandu? Yeah, I don't know. Waka for me anyway. I fucking love Waka.
For you? For me, I think a character that I really, really enjoy just learning more about their backstory was Orin. So like, even when he met Yunalesca after Braska had used Jecht as his final Aeon, like he lashed out at her and was like, Jecht believed in Braska and died for him. Braska believed in Yevon and died for the teachings. And when he went to strike her out of pure sorrow, she killed him. And that's why he's unsent. Like, he actually crawled all the way down Mount Gagazet and met Kamari there. And he told Kamari of Yuna, take her from Bavel and bring her to Besaid. That's where her pilgrimage would start. So I really liked his background and how he's like he knows more than what he lets on, but he doesn't speak unless he's spoken to.
Yeah.
Because it's not his story.
Yeah.
You know, and I really like that about his character. And what I do like about Waka, in the second game, Final Fantasy X-2, he names his son after an Albed name.
Oh, so okay, cool. So there's a good bit of character growth for him.
Yeah, he calls his son Vida, which is an Albed word for hope.
Oh, that's nice.
So he starts his journey off as like this xenophobe, racist character who was like purely blinkered by Yevon's doctrine. And then when the revelation comes that he's been lied to all his life, that his brother actually did die for a false teaching. In the second game, it's almost like he's giving his son this new hope.
Oh, that's really sweet.
I really like that. I did really like that. So yeah. I suppose the sky is the limit. I know that a script has been made for Final Fantasy X-3, and it will happen because it will sell. Like Final Fantasy X for the PlayStation 2 made $80.1 million in revenue from being sold. And I think it's a justifiable number because it really is one of the greatest games of all time. If you haven't played it, I think you're in for great characters, a beautiful score, some deep character development, and a lot of twists. Go play it. Go play it.
I'm gonna play it again. I'm gonna turn on the PlayStation now and give it a go.
You should do, man. And honestly, I think once you've heard everything I've told you, if you go back to it, you'll be like, oh yeah, because I do that every now and then whenever I play it. It's like, not everything what I'm saying here is true.
Yeah, that's the thing. I have a lot more information now than I did on previous playthroughs. So I'm probably going to see a lot more of these little details in the environment and the story and everything. I'm like, oh my God, yeah, that makes so much more sense to me now.
Exactly.
So I'm really excited to dive back in, and I may try 10-2 just to see, and then if a 10-3 happens, I'll be one of the first in line to try that out. Because Final Fantasy is one of these franchises that I've started to get more and more into. You know, I've played through 7, I've played through 7 Remake, I've played through 10, 15 happened.
That's where the whole NX thing that I was talking about happened.
Yeah, oh man.
Got the story and sold as DLC, and then in order to understand really else what was going on, you had to watch an anime and a full-fledged CGI movie. Yeah. That's Square Enix at its best. I actually am thankful that 10 stopped the Square Soft thing, because that's when they were just purely for the players. When the whole Enix thing happened, and they're guilty of doing it in Deus Ex as well.
It's very bad. And hopefully, you know, like with Final Fantasy 16 coming out, hopefully they've learned their lesson, because the last couple of years, I don't know, I personally haven't heard many horror stories coming from Square Enix. It's mostly been Konami.
Konami and CD Projekt Red.
Oh,
yeah, how the mighty have fallen. Yeah, how the mighty have fallen. But I hope now when X3 comes around, it's like that they know that it's a very beloved title.
Yeah,
Final Fantasy X, and that they'll give people what they want.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank you, Shepard, once again for joining me on this brand new edition of The Save Point. It's always a pleasure doing these videos with you, and I really do appreciate your time. So signing off on The Save Point, and please do not forget to save your progress. I have been your host, Joker.
I've been your co-host, Shepard.
Have a good one, guys, and I'll see you later. We'll see you.